Letting go of a loved one can be difficult, and nobody knows this more than Carl Tanzler. Carl, who was married with 2 children, left Austria at the end of World War I in 1920 and immigrated to Florida in the United States. Carl quickly abandoned his family after taking a job in Key West, Florida, where he worked at the U.S. Marine Hospital under the name Count Carl Van Kossel. One day, a Cuban-American woman named Maria Elena Milagro de Hoyos walked into the hospital, and Count Carl saw before him an actual dream come true. Born in Key West in 1909, Maria was brought to the hospital by her mother after becoming ill. As a young boy in Germany, Count Carl, or then just Carl, would often have visions of a stunning, dark-haired woman who was pristine to be his one true love. The 22-year-old beauty resembled his childhood dream girl so closely that he immediately became convinced that their love was meant to be. Unfortunately for them both, Carl had diagnosed her with tuberculosis, which was still considered a fatal disease at the time. Despite his lack of qualifications needed to treat a tuberculosis patient, Carl was determined to save Maria's life and used a variety of specially made tonics, elixirs, and medicines to try and do so. Count Carl administered these treatments in Maria's family home, while showering her with gifts and declaring his love all the while. Despite Carl's efforts, Maria fell to her illness in October 1931, leaving her family and Carl heartbroken. Carl insisted on purchasing a pricey stone mausoleum in Key West Cemetery for her remains to lay, and with their parents' permission, he hired a mortician to prepare her body before locking her inside. Maria's family didn't realize that the only key to the tomb would remain in Count Carl's possession. Carl would quickly take advantage of this privilege, which would result in one of the most disturbing tales of all time. Carl visited Maria's grave every night for nearly 2 years, a habit that stopped abruptly after he lost his job for reasons unknown. While her family did consider this drastic behavior change to be a bit strange, they never would have guessed the reasoning behind it. In April of 1933, Carl removed Maria's body from the mausoleum, no longer requiring him to make his nightly visits to the graveyard, as she would now be housed in his own home. Carl repurposed an old airplane into a makeshift medical laboratory where he would maintain Maria's corpse. There, Carl would use several do-it-yourself tricks to keep her decaying body intact, including plaster of Paris, glass eyes to maintain the integrity of her face, as well as coat hangers and other wires to stabilize her skeletal frame. He had her torso stuffed with rags in an attempt to preserve its original form, and he covered her scalp with bits of real hair. Carl added copious amounts of perfumes, flowers, disinfectants, and preserving agents to keep the rotting odor at bay, and would routinely apply mortician's wax to Maria's face to keep her looking somewhat alive. Carl had the corpse wrapped in a dress, gloves, and jewelry, and placed the body in his bed, which he shared with the corpse for the next 7 years, with pretty much the entire town talking about the reclusive man often seen buying women's clothing and perfume. On top of one local boy's account of witnessing the doctor dancing with what appeared to be a giant doll, Maria's family began to suspect something was off. After Maria's sister showed up at Carl's home in 1940, the jig was up. There she found what she believed to be a life-size doll of her departed sister. Arriving authorities quickly determined that this doll was, in fact, Maria herself, and they arrested Carl for grave robbing. An autopsy of the body revealed the intricacies of Carl's work, which included a paper tube inserted between her legs forming a makeshift lady parts, although Carl never admitted that the two of them were intimate. The psychiatric evaluation determined that Carl was competent to stand trial, but despite everything, the statute of limitation had expired for the crime he was accused of committing, leaving Carl free to go. Maria's body was placed on display at a local funeral home where nearly 7,000 people came to see the corrupted corpse for themselves. Her body was finally laid to rest once and for all in an unmarked grave in Key West Cemetery. Carl received quite a bit of sympathy during the trial, some even viewing him as a hopeless romantic. Nevertheless, he wanted to live out the rest of his days alone and died in his home in 1952, where he was discovered 3 weeks after his passing. If you like this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe. Be well, be safe, goodbye.